Okay, I think that's my introduction for today. We are going to kick things off with our jurisdictional updates. We have our 6 jurisdictions, Alaska, California, Hawaii, Oregon, Washington, and British Columbia. And each of our executive members, they're kind of the board of directors, so to speak, of the task force, are going to give an update. And we will start with Tom Cullen, who's the administrator of the Office of Spill Prevention and Response in California, the Department of Fish and Wildlife. And with that, Tom, I'm going to hand the baton to you.
Terrific. Can you hear me, Sarah?
Yes, loud and clear. Thank you.
Can you see my slides?
Yes, beautiful.
Hi, everyone. I'm thrilled to see the turnout in the participant list, and I see a lot of people that I owe money to, so you can put that in the chat and remind me, give me your updated mailing address. So, wow, yeah, it's hard to believe it's another year, and here we are. I'm coming to you from the North Bay of San Francisco, and 80% of this past year has been involved in the 2 cases that I'll be talking about on the panel this afternoon. So I had to go and compile some notes and remind myself of some of the other major things that happened this past year, but let's dive right into it. So slide is not advancing. Let me try here. Let's see. There we go. Okay. So this looks familiar probably from last year. We're on pace for about 4 reports of spills to state waters or to the environment. You know, we have to triage and see if this actually reaches the water, but up about 100 cases more than this time last year, you know, spread fairly evenly across our 3 response regions, north, south, and central. We continue to have a majority of these probably from vehicles, tanker trucks, a lot of pipeline incidents, which we'll be getting into. And let's continue to some of the more significant ones. So right after the annual meeting last year, we had a product pipeline, a 10-inch pipeline that was under this bypass flood control channel in the city of Walnut Creek, which is to the west of the San Francisco area. It was operated by Kinder Morgan, and they started noticing some pressure drops, trying to figure out where this thing was happening. Some gasoline was daylighting through some of the cracks in this bypass. Now, what you see these folks walking through is actually water from the flood control. So this is not the actual gasoline. But they did a lot of exploration, doing some core drilling down to try to find it, and eventually did locate it. Oops, a little slide out of context here, but this shows a lot of the air monitoring stations that were set up because it's a very heavily residential area. We also did a lot of going subsurface because, to my surprise, there was a lot of these residents have well water, and so we want to make sure that their water wasn't contaminated. And sure enough, they eventually located it through some radiation tracing and discovered that a root from an oak tree had gone and bent this pipe and created some damage. And there's a crack, sure enough. And as of the end of February, they had collected about 19,000 gallons of gasoline. This is still in progress with the water board, mainly being the main agency right now. And the investigation is continuing into all aspects of the reporting and the response. So continue on to, this is a really interesting one, Toro Canyon Creek. So back in 1882, there was natural seep that is all over California, inland and offshore. And Occidental Oil Company decided, well, let's try to capture some of that. And so in the early 1990s, US EPA retrofitted the site to prevent seepage into the environment, and then handed over to Santa Barbara County to maintain the facility. Well, back in August, the county discovered a small leak from a pipe in the facility, made the proper notifications, and we think that there was damage to the pipe from one of the many wildfires that has been affecting California of late. So they're working with a water board grant to make repairs, There's been some wildlife take, some small birds, bats, even a squirrel, some frogs and lizards. We estimate that there was about 400 to 600 gallons released into the environment. Here's where it is, down in Santa Barbara County. I should have been advancing my slides along with it. And that continues. Okay. The third biggest one, I would say, of this past year was back in February. We had a release in the late afternoon of February 9th from a 16-inch unpressurized, they call it a recovered oil line that runs from the you can see the ships tie up on this Chevron Long Wharf in Richmond, and about 500 to 750 gallons of a low sulfur diesel oil and water mix. So about 70% water, about 30% of product went into the bay. And here's where we observed some sheening. The actual break was about the size of a quarter or a nickel in this line, was kind of where you see the bend in the Long Wharf. Here's some of the sheen that you can see. And so fortunately, the main OSRO that serves Chevron MSRC has a lot of equipment located probably about a mile as the crow flies. And they were on scene fairly quickly, getting about at the end of the day, actually the next day, probably a total of 7,000 feet of containment boom and collection boom on water. Now, being very light, a lot of this evaporated. We had the fortune of a very sunny day the next day to burn off a lot of it. Here's some of the folks there, MSRC boat with a lot of the boom getting ready to head out. Scat went out, didn't find any wildlife affected, didn't really find any product on the beach. It was all pretty much said and done within 48 hours. So this was the biggest spill to San Francisco Bay since the 2008 Dubai Star, which was a year after Koska Busan. So it got a lot of media interest. Investigation is continuing. Okay, you're going to hear from me later this afternoon about the two big ones. The American Challenger case, which still is going on. This is a 90-foot steel trawler that's aground in Marin County. And of course, the Pipeline 547 spill that we're still currently working down in Southern California. So some ongoing projects. I just took the slide from last year's presentation and did some updates. I mentioned that we were kind of suffering under the effects, the cumulative effects of inflation since we last had our per barrel fee increased in 2012. And we were very fortunate that with the governor's current budget, we're now enjoying a slight increase to the per barrel fee to sustain, not grow, keep the carts, the wheels on the cart, so to speak, for our program. So we're now up to 8.5 cents per barrel of oil that arrives at California's refineries. Speaking of the refineries, there's a lot of changes in the market, of course, with these petroleum-based renewable fuels, mainly derived from animal tallow as a feedstock. And while they're great for air quality, lower carbon, when they hit the water or hit habitat, they present every bit the threat that petroleum does. And so the same bill that gave us the fee increase also expanded OSPR's authority to regulate and respond to renewable fuel incidents. Our regulations unit, I got to get a nod to, I saw that our main analyst, Christine Kluge, is on the line, and I'm hoping Andrew Benware as well, doing tremendous amount of work in trying to, in these crazy COVID days and a lot of spills happening and other things, that are detractors, trying to push out various regulations. Of course, we're now with our new renewable fuels authority, we're going to be starting to commence that rulemaking in the next year. And then, of course, we have that bane of my existence, the abandoned derelict vessels, which account for about 30% of our responses, our releases to the environment. And we're continuing. We had a big session yesterday with our executive and coordinating committee of the task force, and then went into federal partners. And this always is a topic that bubbles to the surface. And we're really hoping to seize the momentum of the American Challenger for California, but other instances throughout the region to maybe get some changes to federal law and to try to get for California, some legislation enacted that will help us better address this threat. Oh, speaking of the topic, here's some more pictures. You've seen this one before of what the Sacramento and San Joaquin River deltas look like east of San Francisco, various collections of boats in different deteriorating conditions. There's a couple of them right here that were, and this is a good one because this is a nest of several barges and a crane barge that the legislature gave the State Lands Commission about $15 million to help with, in partnership with US EPA and the Coast Guard Corps of Engineers to start removing these. You say, why are you showing a slide for February 2021? Well, this was a really successful, we do this biennial spill technology workshop. This year we had 4 days with about 430 participants, 75 panelists. We had participants from the US, Canada, France, United Kingdom, Croatia, Israel, Libya, Sweden, Australia. I put this up here because in light of the Pipeline 547 spill that was initially detected at night and is creating a lot of concern and anxiety because there's not a lot that we can do at night. We've promised the legislature that we're going to hold a special technology workshop sometime in probably the first quarter of 2022, mainly focused on detection, whether that's remote, actual, in the air, on the surface, subsurface. But stand by, we'll probably be calling out to many of you to help us with that. And as I wrap up, as always, we have a lot of information on the things that I've just discussed and other projects that we're working on our website. And I would be remiss if I didn't wish all of my 230 professional colleagues that I'm so blessed to work with a very happy 30th birthday. And with that, Sarah, I think, are we going to do questions at the very end of all the jurisdictional updates or open it up after?
We can open it up now. We've got some about 4 more minutes. So
Oh dear.
yeah, I have not seen a question pop in yet, but folks, do fire away any questions you have for Tom and the rest of the speakers today in the Q&A bubble. And we'll rattle those off when we start seeing them.
Better put my cheaters back on so I can read these.
Yeah. Right. So far, no questions, Tom.
Wonderful. I love it.
Oh, well, here we go. One came in. Info on that first quarter tech conference online yet? Do you have any available?
No, we haven't picked a date yet. Thanks for the interest. But I'd say because we want to do it right, probably March or April would be my guess. I know Greg McGowan, my chief of response technology, is also here, and we've been talking. So stand by. We'll be reaching out. I'm putting on the website as soon as we have a save the date.
Fantastic. All right. Well, I think you got off easy, Tom. Wait till this afternoon. You'll get, that's where people are really going to wind up, right?
I'm going to take no prisoners.
Exactly. Hey, well, thank you for that update. Always great to hear from California and from you in particular. Quick slight change in the agenda. We are going to move Lydia Emer, we're going to move Laurel Nash's presentation up to follow Tom's. We have a slight schedule crunch, so Laurel's going to need to move hers up in the schedule here. So with that, I'd like to introduce Laurel Nash, the Assistant Deputy Minister of the BC Ministry of Environment and Climate Change Strategy. Thank you, Laurel.
Great. Thank you very much, Sarah. And also, Tom, great presentation. I'd like to also thank you for letting me move up on the agenda. As you can appreciate, we've got a number of issues that have been transpiring here in British Columbia with the atmospheric river that has moved forward, and just dealing with a few matters that is going to be taking me away from the meeting today. So apologies for that. I have as well with me Sarah Batzek and Kelly Krasnowski, who will be engaged throughout the day and have really contributed to our update today. So thank you very much. And I would like to acknowledge that I'm calling in from the territory of the Lekwungen speaking peoples, just outside of Victoria, British Columbia, on the Coast Salish Sea, and in particular the Wasanic, Esquimalt, and Songhees nations. It's a great privilege today to provide you with this update. And next slide. Today, we're going to just give you a bit of an update on the program and the work that we've been covering over the last year. And so this slide just goes over what our program is in British Columbia. We deliver the program that carries out a wide range of activities that include preparing and responding to oil spills, chemical spills, and spills of any substance that could affect or harm the natural environment. We provide environmental emergency response officers to assess conditions and oversee the response when an incident occurs. We provide scientific advice and site support during an incident. And we oversee and regulate environmental recovery following a spill. And we work with partner agencies to effectively coordinate the roles and responsibilities of all responders during an incident. And our team also develops regulations, policies, procedures, plans, operational guidelines, and cooperative agreements and technical information for a coordinated response during emergency. So we're really kind of the one-stop shop for environmental emergency response in the terrestrial context. So in British Columbia and in Canada, you will note that navigable waters are under the jurisdiction of the federal government, and we work very, very closely with our partners through the Canadian Coast Guard and Environment and Climate Change Canada. Next slide. So this slide is a summary of our spill events for this last year. Just some highlights that you can see from this slide. This is just broken down by our different regions. We had 4,734 reports of spills or other environmental emergencies. This is up over 100 from last year. We had 27 incidents that were considered high risk and required a field response. Those included flammable liquids, and then we had equipment failure as well, such as ruptured equipment lines. That was the most common cause of spills, and most came from an unknown source. The commercial sector was responsible for the most number of spills, which is likely due to the fact that this sector is the largest user of petroleum products in our province. Next slide. We've spent quite a bit of time working on our relationship and an approach to reconciliation with Indigenous nations, and have been developing a number of commitments that guide the work that we do and how we do that with our Indigenous partners. And so this slide lays out those 7 commitments to partner. So working together and learning from our Indigenous partners as we're moving forward with prevention, planning, response, and recovery. Really developing better policy and procedures and guidelines to support the inclusion of our Indigenous partners and nations and organizations where at a provincial level, but also in a context of within their territories. So working with them to ensure that we're respectful of the approach and we're doing it together. Acknowledging existing Aboriginal and treaty rights, as well as title and jurisdiction of Indigenous nations that may be affected by spills or, in their territory. Encouraging Indigenous participation in the planning for hazardous material incidents, training together, recognizing Indigenous nations as full partners in decision-making during response and recovery, encouraging Indigenous participation in incident command post positions as a critical component, really, of effectively managing responses, and then promoting within our organization and more broadly throughout the sector, a culture that supports and promotes reconciliation in all of our work. So the next slide. And then, sorry, just before I dig into this slide as well, I just wanted to highlight an example of how we are taking these policies and putting them into practice. We had a prolonged sewage spill in the Williams Lake River, and our recovery team used these principles to develop a tripartite agreement between the province, Williams Lake Indian Band, and the city of Williams Lake. And it really outlines the expectations of environmental recovery, protection, and First Nations resources from long-lasting impacts. And so what we really saw in this context was a true partnership in moving forward to respond to a very impactful spill on the river. So the regional response planning in the Northern Shelf bioregion, we have the potential to impact our environmental emergencies have the potential to impact rural Indigenous communities throughout the province in very distinct ways. And reliance on local ecosystems for food and other resources necessary for economic, sociocultural, spiritual, and physical well-being are at risk from spills. In addition to the primary mental, physical, and community impacts of spills, communities may also be subject to secondary traumas related to response and recovery. This year, an agreement between 14 coastal First Nations, the province of BC, and the Canadian government is being developed through a government-to-government initiative under the Reconciliation Framework Agreement for Bioregional Oceans Management and Protected. This collaborative approach describes key roles and responsibilities for integrating capabilities and signals a change for how spills are managed in the marine environment. We're very excited and proud to be engaging in this relationship and this approach as we're going forward with our some of our coastal nations. Next slide. So this is a picture and an update on the historic shipwreck near Bly Island. And as I mentioned earlier, the Canadian Coast Guard really is the lead when we're dealing with the marine environment. And I just have to do a real big shout out to them, as well as the Mawachat First Nation, some of the non-government organizations and local communities in that area for really working together to respond to the cleanup of this historic shipwreck. So this is the MV, and I would never pronounce it correctly, Skedike, and it was carrying wood pulp and barley bound for Portland, Oregon, when it went down just off Bly Island Marine Provincial Park. And this is just off of Vancouver Island. In mid-September 2020, after numerous sightings of sheening and oiling around Bly Island, the Canadian Coast Guard confirmed the vessel was resting hull up in 100 to 120 meters of water with product seeping from more than one location. Heavy oil was observed on the water and staining seen on rocks on the shoreline. And as a result, the Canadian Coast Guard requested for the formation of a unified command that included our ministry as well as the First Nations. And due to COVID, it was established virtually. A site response was initiated and the deployment of containment and protection booming in the area of the wreck. As the response continued over a period of 7 months, a marine salvage company located leaks, applied temporary patches to the hull to prevent and reduce upswelling of product, and surveyed the hull for fuel tank locations. Our environmental emergency response program operated within the Unified Command and had dedicated staff working in the environmental unit as deputy environment environmental unit leader, wildlife specialist, sampling specialist, shoreline assessment, waste management, and other support roles. So a very significant partnership and effort was undertaken in this space. In June of this year, the salvage company removed the bulk oil from the vessel, eliminating the risk of approximately 60 tons of heavy fuel, oil, and marine diesel from reaching the marine environment. And I think this is just one example of what we will see more and more of as we look to addressing the abandoned and derelict vessels along our entire coastline of the continent. Next slide. So you may have heard recently, very, very recently, as in last month, we had the motor vessel Zim Kingston in very heavy seas. And initially the report out from this was that they had lost 40 containers. It ended up that it is upward, I think, of over 110 containers that were actually lost as part of that incident in, as I say, very significant seas. So the two of those containers were of a toxic substance, and they were not found as of yet. They were anticipated that they had possibly sunk. And that material or those chemicals were to be used for mining and textile bleaching. The vessel managed to transit to calmer seas off of Victoria. So that's about 7 kilometers off of Victoria and Constance Bank. And on Saturday, October 23rd, the vessel reported a fire on board originating from some of the damaged containers. About 10 containers on the deck were burned, and this burning occurred throughout the night. It was subsequently extinguished, but then there was a 24-hour fire watch on board just to ensure there wasn't further burning. We were also involved in the air monitoring, and these stations were established onshore just to monitor for public health concerns, and teams on the vessel found that actually the air quality wasn't too bad and there weren't any impacts to local communities in Victoria area. So what has since happened is there is a plan to move the vessel to a safe port so that the cargo can be offloaded, the remaining cargo. There is still work underway to determine the final destination for that. So that is hopefully going to be established fairly soon. And we are anticipating it will be one of our Canadian ports where that offloading will happen. You also probably have heard that there were a number of containers that did wash ashore. Unfortunately, only 4 so far, and it's anticipated the others have sunk. But those containers did wash ashore at Raft Cove, Sea Otter Cove, Shuttleworth Bight, Palmerston Beach, Guys Bays, and a number of other areas. I do have to say this has been, again, another example of some real partnership that has occurred, and government, nations, communities, NGOs all coming together, as well as companies to actually work to do that cleanup. And so some examples of that are Quatsino, Pacific Biological Services, CanPac, Epic Exio, Amex Marine Salvage. They all were working together and were hired to help with cleanup of the northern coast shoreline. Found all kinds of interesting things, from refrigerators right through to Christmas ornaments that have washed up on the beach. The whole incident is being coordinated by Incident Command Post out of Victoria and managed through Unified Command. We are, as I say, still concerned about the remaining 105 containers. The ship is stable and monitoring of beaches does continue. Okay, and then next slide. Integrated incident management system. So we reported out last year, we are continuing to implement our IIMS. We're leading efforts to implement an emergency integrated incident management system capable of supporting all hazards in emergency management. This system will be designed to support improved communication, collaboration among emergency management agencies, and enable fast, effective decision-making, coordination, and will improve environmental protection and public safety. The system went operational last November, and we're looking to expand it to more than just emergency management BC and our ministry to do a all of sector approach. And the system does provide support to all pillars of emergency management and does information capture. So we're hoping to expand it, as I have mentioned. Next slide. And of course, everyone needs to give a little bit of an update on safety and training. Our training program recently underwent modernization. We've got over 650 hours of technical and safety training delivered over a 2.5-year period. During COVID-19, physical distancing requirements, the health of our staff, we have undertook shifting critical training development and delivery to a virtual environment. And we're hoping to get back to more in-person training in the following year. Virtual training is good, but it's not quite the same as getting out there and actually doing it on the ground. COVID-19 has had a direct impact on our training. And so we're hoping, as I'd mentioned, that we'll have that opportunity to come together very soon. And then our last slide, just a thank you. I do want to just again raise my hands to the Oilspill Task Force and the work that you do as we continue to collaborate along our important coast. Really for this opportunity of the annual meetings as well, for us to talk about the highlights from the year, opportunities to collaborate, opportunities to do joint training, and really address some of the critical challenges that are in front of us. I just have to highlight that I know that yesterday at our annual general meeting, we talked about how climate is continuing to impact the work in front of us and how we prepare for spill response. And so I'm looking forward to really digging into that approach as we move forward as a task force. So again, thank you very much. And I hope the rest of the session goes really well. And thanks for the opportunity to present.
Thank you so much, Laurel. That was an excellent presentation. And if you have time for one question, we have one open in the Q&A. We might actually have a couple coming in now. So hopefully you have a minute or two to stay with us. So the first one is in from Lovell Pratt. The Southern resident J-Pod traveled north past the Zim Kingston on October 24th during the fire. Was the location of the Southern resident killer whales being monitored? Was the Environmental Unit Incident Command aware of the pod traveling north past the Zim? And was hazing conducted or considered to keep the pod away from the Zim Kingston?
So I don't have an answer to the monitoring as such. I can ask Sarah or Kelly if they have an update. As well, I do see some of our colleagues from the Coast Guard on the call. So if they have any update on that as the lead, that would be helpful too. And then if not, we can circle back with a response to that.
Fantastic. Thank you. Yeah, so folks, if you have some information you can share out to the group, feel free to pop it in the Q&A bubble as well. We have another question from Stephanie Spencer. Has water monitoring been conducted after the fire suppression?
I believe that monitoring did carry on after the fire suppression. Again, maybe I saw Sarah had her hand up to, I think, actually respond to maybe the question around the JPOD as well. And I may look to her to respond to that question as well.
Okay, fantastic.
Sorry, I can jump in, Sarah, if that's okay. It's Sarah Bassick with BC. So with the JPOD questions, the environmental unit was aware, but with regards to the hazing, I'm not too sure, and we'll need to reach out to our Canadian Coast Guard counterparts to help answer that question.
Thank you, Sarah. Excellent. We have a question in from Dustin Godfrey, who's a journalist with Burnaby Beacon. How is the atmospheric river expected to impact your work? And are there any hazards being created with oil infrastructure, such as at the Parkland refinery?
Very good question. So I think the atmospheric river has significantly impacted our work and climate change overall. We, of course, have been actively working with Emergency Management BC and other agencies with respect to the incident in Lytton. And then now, of course, we're engaged with Merritt and a number of these other communities that have been quite devastated by the flooding that has occurred and is continuing to impact those communities. Our agency, so the Ministry of Environment, works with Emergency Management BC, and our role in more specifically is around the environmental response, as you may be aware. And so we participate in the unified command and approach that needs to be taken to respond to those emergencies. And then we will be working very closely around recovery as well, and the rebuild that will be necessary. Part of our organization's role is also to support work that's needed around contaminated sites. You also asked about infrastructure and a pipeline facility, or I can't remember which one exactly you asked about. We will be checking in on that one, but infrastructure is absolutely a very significant concern, be it pipelines or rail that may be carrying toxic substances, oil as well as other substances.
Great. Thank you, Laurel. We have one follow-up comment from Cynthia Johnston that DFO, Department of Fisheries and Oceans Canada, monitors southern resident killer whale through hydrophones. So there may be obviously some work being done just in tracking them through that hydrophonic work, knowing where they are and how to navigate that incident. I think we'll need to wrap up there and move on to our next task force member. Thanks, Laurel, again. That was an excellent presentation, and thank you for engaging the Q&A. Folks, do rest assured that any questions that were unanswered will be answered either today during our meeting or in follow-up. So we have everyone's contact information, and we can send out the question and answers following the event should you wish for more information or for more details are coming in throughout the day that we can share with you. So thanks for your patience in that. Q&A is always a little awkward online, but we'll make the most of it. So next I'd like to invite up Lydia Emer, who's the Administrator for Land Quality Division, Oregon Department of Environmental Quality. Lydia, take it away.
Well, thank you. And I am going to try sharing my screen. There we go. Okay, can you confirm that you're seeing it?
All good to go, Lydia.
Thank you, Caleb. I appreciate that. So good morning. My name is Lydia Emer, and it's my privilege to share highlights from Oregon's Emergency Response Program. This last year has focused on stabilizing the program with additional resources that we received from the 2019 legislative session while navigating unprecedented concurrent challenges that test our small but mighty team. Okay, there we go. So this slide highlights the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality's mission, which is to be a leader in restoring, maintaining, and enhancing the quality of Oregon's air, land, and water. We saw changes to our statewide team over the last year. Mike Zolich, long-term program lead and manager, retired in 2020 and was succeeded by Wes Risher, solidifying a focused headquarters manager role that we've not had in a decade. Additionally, we now have a fully staffed high hazard rail program. We integrated GIS into program planning and response activities and stabilized Eastern Region's state on-scene coordinator position. The following slides will focus on how we've integrated these welcome resources and authorities. Oregon's High Hazard Rail Program was authorized by the 2019 legislative session and formally launched in May 2021 when our proposed rules were adopted by the Environmental Quality Commission. The program is comprised of 2 FTE who are responsible for reviewing railroad plans, developing geographic response plans, and conducting drills and exercises. There are currently 2 high hazard rail operators in Oregon, Burlington Northern Santa Fe and Union Pacific, each of which has submitted comprehensive oil spill response plans for review. Plan review involves tribes located along high hazard rail routes, as well as the Office of the State Fire Marshal, Department of Land and Conservation Development, and the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife. Once approved, we'll shift into planning with the State Fire Marshal for an annual drill and response program that meets the National Preparedness for Response Exercise Program guidelines. Concurrently, staff will continue working on developing inland geographic response plans along high hazard rail routes with community input at the local and tribal levels. Since the Oregon High Hazard Rail Program is in its infancy, we're working closely with the Washington Department of Ecology for plan review, drill evaluation, and geographic response plan development. The 2019 legislature also approved a GIS specialist for our program. The value of this dedicated expertise was clearly seen in the 2020 wildfire response and recovery efforts. Examples include identifying impacted homes and businesses, tracking progress of hazardous material removal, including building a dashboard for public viewing, identifying natural resources and vulnerable facilities at risk, and supporting numerous data-driven aspects of the response. GIS is now integrated into in-field map production, continues to support geographic response plans, including our new high hazard rail GRPs, and is used in tracking abandoned and derelict vessels. Recent innovations include a secure online GIS application for identifying resources at risk and creating a secure common operating picture and virtual situation status display. These were successfully tested in recent worst case drills and will be part of our ongoing toolkit. The next part of the presentation focuses on emerging issues and trends in Oregon, many of which are shared by other jurisdictions in this meeting. In 2020, DEQ saw 39 transfers of crude oil from Zenith and Portland, with shipments of both dilute bitumen and Bakken crude being transferred to California, Washington, and Alaska. Shipments to California did not happen in 2021, and only 20 transfers occurred as of October 31st. We project Zenith will conduct 25 transfers in 2021, a 36% decrease from the previous year. The Columbia Pacific biorefinery has shifted to exclusively conducting transloading operations of renewable diesel, which is shipped about every 3 weeks to Long Beach in California. DEQ has tracked 14 shipments in 2021, with 17 expected by the end of the year. Abandoned and derelict vessels continue to be a major concern for our rivers and coastal waters. This is the former Coast Guard cutter Alert, an ADV which had been tracking for a number of years and just sank its mooring at the I-5 bridge in Portland. Thankfully, the Coast Guard had performed a timely preemptive removal of hazardous materials and oil in 2020. Our ADV task force is comprised of DEQ, Ecology, and the Coast Guard, is currently tracking 10 ADV of 35 feet or greater in length in the Columbia River and coastal systems. Aggravating this ongoing issue across all task force jurisdictions are the smaller pleasure craft, the majority of which are being used by the houseless community. Approximately 230 pleasure craft have been identified as potential ADVs in Multnomah County alone. A recent response to the fishing vessel Tiffany in Oregon waters will be highlighted during the incident review portion of today's meeting. The challenges we faced in the past year were both myriad and unprecedented, including COVID-19, wildfires, winter storms, a record heat event, drought, and chlorine shortage, along with all the various spills that happen in any given year. COVID-19 continues to pull resources from spill response as we support agency safety protocols, as well as Oregon's COVID response. Here are some of the Coast Guard personnel that supported the COVID-19 mass vaccination mission at the Oregon Convention Center in Portland. Included are two of our core team members who supported this mission for 4 months from March through June 2021. Drills were also impacted. DEQ currently reviews and maintains response plans for 12 fuel storage and transfer facilities, 5 petroleum pipeline facilities, and 3 vessel plans. Uncertainty around in-person exercises resulted in many companies pushing the drills to the 4th quarter. Most were conducted virtually, with some a mix of virtual and in-person venues. DEQ participated in 9 drills in 7 weeks between September and November. In total, DEQ supported 6 worst-case drills and an additional 4 annual tabletops in 2021. Beginning in September 2020, wildfires devastated over 1 million acres of land in Oregon. The fires killed at least 11 people and destroyed thousands of homes and other structures. DEQ devoted a tremendous amount of staff time to assist the wildfire response and recovery efforts on many fronts, including assistance to EPA on hazardous material removal from burned structures, statewide debris management planning, and collection of data on sensitive areas and facilities at risk. We resourced watershed protection, such as stabilization of landscapes and structures to improve runoff and address general water quality concerns, including assistance on drinking water issues and water quality monitoring. This was another area where team members who are reservists were called to action. DEQ's emergency response program continues to navigate an ever-increasing number of concurrent emergencies. In 2021, beyond COVID and wildfires, we also responded to the February winter storms, the chlorine shortage, and extreme heat and drought conditions. The winter storms caused widespread damage, adding to the difficulty the state was already facing in recovery efforts from the 2020 wildfires. The energy grid was significantly affected by the storm, with thousands of power lines downed and outages throughout the state. At its peak, over 250,000 PGE customers were without power, with some experiencing multi-day power outages that forced them into community shelters. On the pollution side, dozens of transformers were downed, and in Portland, 2 marinas suffered damage from collection of ice and snow on boathouses and other protective shelters, which subsequently collapsed and sank dozens of pleasure craft of various sizes at each facility. This is the Portland Rowing Club after the 2021 winter storms. DEQ's primary role in the chlorine shortage and drought and heat event was to support the state response structure with particular focus on how these events affected water supply and wastewater treatment. Of course, while all these significant events were occurring throughout the year, our daily operations and responses to spills of oil and hazardous material had to be maintained. So following are some highlights of 2 of the most significant spills we responded to in the previous year. On March 23rd, 2021, a tanker crashed in Staten, spilling 2,300 gallons of gasoline onto the ground. Due to unusual soil conditions and a very shallow groundwater table, the fuel migrated quickly to the west and north, threatening multiple residences and public drinking water wells, as seen on this resources at risk graphic. DEQ oversaw the excavation of an intercept trench to keep the fuel from reaching a nearby residence to the west. Contractors quickly installed a gallery of sparge wells to keep subsurface contaminants away from the home. Under DEQ supervision, approximately 5,600 tons of petroleum contaminated soil was excavated from the spill site. Contractors conducted active air monitoring at nearby mobile home park to ensure residents were safe during this activity. At its conclusion, contamination remains in place along the utility lines. A robust monitoring well network was installed to excavate the impact of remaining contaminants on groundwater. Our efforts to prevent contamination from reaching the nearby residents to the west succeeded, and the home is safe from petroleum vapors, and no petroleum compounds have been detected in the drinking water well. Excavation of groundwater along the utility corridor is ongoing. On April 6, 2021, the city of Monmouth discovered gasoline in their sewage system. Soon, businesses near downtown intersections started reporting gasoline smells in their establishments. DEQ, the city of Monmouth, and a contractor investigated and tracked down the gasoline to a service station. Fuel record reconciliation revealed that an underground storage tank system released approximately 14,000 gallons of gasoline over a short period. The station owner began fuel recovery efforts immediately under DEQ supervision. Contractors recovered fuel from several locations in the sanitary sewer system. Initial investigations revealed unsafe levels of gasoline vapors in nearby businesses from this fuel in the sewers. Once removed, vapor concentrations fell to safer levels. Environmental investigations on site showed gasoline contamination in the soil and groundwater beneath the entire site. Contractors for the site owner removed all structures, decommissioned all underground storage tanks on the property, and excavated the contaminated soil down to the groundwater table of the site's entire footprint. This excavation resulted in disposal of around 11,000 cubic yards of petroleum contaminated soil. DEQ conducted this cleanup under a joint effort between emergency response, underground storage tanks, and leaking underground storage tank programs. Soil and groundwater samples indicate that additional actions may be required off-site. Soil and groundwater investigation is ongoing, with the leaking underground storage tank program managing the long-term cleanup actions for this incident. Looking forward, Oregon will again be working on a legislative proposal to financially stabilize our core work and enhance the statewide emergency response program. Success in this request would allow us to better manage concurrent events while also building relationships with underrepresented communities, traditional partners, and fee payers to understand future expectations of the program. Like other jurisdictions in this conference, we're also looking to understand changing technology and products to understand where rule changes may be necessary. Many thanks for the opportunity to share a little of Oregon's past year with you all. I'm going to stop sharing and turn it back over to Sarah. Thank you.
Yay, thank you, Lydia. Excellent presentation. Loved all the images. It was incredible. Photos do speak 1,000 words, right? Yeah, I'm looking at the Q&A. We have one question's come in so far from Rain Admin. Washington Department of Ecology is required to provide quarterly crude oil movement reports by rail, vessel, and pipeline to the public with more regular oil movement updates to emergency responders, tribes, and local governments when requested. Why hasn't Oregon Department of Environmental Quality adopted similar reporting requirements?
I am going to ask Wes Risher, if you're on the line, if you have knowledge about that. Otherwise, I will go back to the High Hazard Rail program and check in with the experts, unless they're also on the line. I think it's probably grounded in our statute and rules.
Lydia, we do not have that requirement at this point in time. I would say that both Brandon and Kirian are participating in the McCall worst case drill today, so they're not attending today's session. We would certainly like to have that movement of product in the state. We do get information with regard to the volumes on an annual basis, but we don't get it to the level that Washington Ecology gets.
Thank you, Wes.
Thank you. Yeah, as a follow-up, the task force does report out every year our crude movement data, where we collect information on crude that is moved across the jurisdictions by rail, vessel, and pipeline. And that's available on our website. But again, that's an annual summary, but it's a partial answer there as well. I don't see any more questions coming in for you, Lydia. We'll give it another few seconds here. Again, feel free to type any in if you have questions. But at this point, let's call it a wrap. Okay,
Thanks,
you.
everybody.
Yeah, thank you for a great presentation. Hey, everyone, we're going to give you a 1-minute stretch break. Get up from your chair, circle around, don't go far, because in a minute, we're going to pick up again with Tiffany Larson from Alaska DEC. So a 1-minute break. We'll join back at 11 on the nose. And Tiffany, if you want to get yourself queued up and ready to go, we'll start up again in a minute. All righty. I see that Tiffany is on and ready to present. So welcome back, everybody. That was the quickest micro break ever, but got to do it. Rest the eyes from the screen. With this handoff, I will introduce Tiffany Larson, who is the Director of Spill Prevention Response Program at Alaska's Department of Environmental Conservation. Welcome, Tiffany, and take it away.
Thank you, Sarah, and good morning, everyone. Well, the opening slide, it was my introduction, so I'm just gonna roll right through that one. Maybe slide advance. Hold on. All right. If you didn't know, this is 2021 is DEC's 50th anniversary. The Alaska Department of Environmental Conservation celebrates our mission to protect human health and the environment. Of note, we are just 6 months younger than the US Environmental Protection Agency. So since 1971, ADEC has partnered with agencies to facilitate the safe development of Alaska's abundant resources to protect the environment. We do this by controlling pollution and enforcing laws to improve the quality of life and create economic opportunities for Alaskans. ADEC will continue to ensure future generations of Alaskans benefit from its beginnings, and we're thankful and pleased to have you as partners in this effort. The obligatory update on COVID. Most of us on this call are involved in response in some form, and so we're used to that adaptability component. And so for that, our update is this. It remains imperative that the regulatory agencies actively adapt to COVID to maintain safety and meet our mission. As a department, DEC continues to adapt to COVID and safe work responsibilities. Our team is fully functional in its day-to-day activities, with most staff working between the home, field, and office as needed. The majority of the division's staff are teleworking through early December as a interim step the governor's taken to help reduce our numbers of the Delta variant surge. Thereafter, though, telework is here to stay for us, and we expect our new status quo to be about 75% of our workforce actively pursuing some form of telework. So under COVID-19 precautions, SPAR, the Division of Spill Prevention and Response, that is, hereafter referred to as SPAR throughout the rest of this presentation, we maintained our regulatory oversight by conducting virtual inspections and exercises, including a records review or digital audit of regulated facilities. This summer, ADEC resumed in-person drills and inspections with a strong emphasis on the safety of our staff and partners. With the COVID-19 numbers on the rise, we now have the tools to manage our regulatory obligations virtually as necessary. So regulatory update, on November 1st, 2021, the Prevention, Preparedness, and Response Program in SPAR initiated a 90-day public comment period for proposed revisions to oil discharge prevention and contingency plan regs. Proposed revisions include but aren't limited to, asterisk, consolidation, streamlining, modernization, clarification, and updates to make the regulations easier to implement for all parties while assuring spill prevention and response readiness planning levels remain stable. That public comment period runs from November 1st, 2021 through January 31st, 22, which is 3 times longer than the requisite 30-day notice to give ample time for all of those interested to comment on that article. So this histogram here displays the number of spills responded to by primary product type, crude, non-crude, contaminated water, and hazardous substances by fiscal year. State fiscal year for Alaska runs July 1 to June 30th every year. So crude, that is what it sounds like. That only represents crude oil or unrefined product. Non-crude is all refined products. Contaminated water includes processed water, produced water, source water, seawater, and hazardous substances are generally those defined in CERCLA and others identified by the state. So you'll see in fiscal year 21 that approximately 32% of the reported spills warranted some form of follow-up from the department, either a phone follow-up for verification or an actual field inspection with the potential responsible party. This is a, this represents the average product released over 10 years. The product category percentages are pretty consistent across the years. Non-crude products, of course, are the most frequently spilled substance type, which, as a reminder, was just all unrefined products. Crude oil, and the number of releases. The crude oil exploration, production, and refineries are all regulated industries and require oil discharge prevention and contingency plans in the state. Since the mid-90s, that trend line has been declining. You can see that pretty dramatically here. The volume released is in gallons, and the 3 spikes you see in 2001, 2006, and 2010 are the result of the following 3 things. In 2001, the Trans-Alaska Pipeline was shot. It had a bullet hole in it that released 285,600 gallons in October. In March 2006, BP's GC2 oil transit line released 212,252 gallons, and the Trans-Alaska Pipeline Pump Station 9 released 108,360 gallons in May 2010, but that was the secondary containment. But there have been no major spills in the state since 2011. I feel like I need to knock on, yes, Formica, that's what's nearest me. But moving on. So did the slide advance for you guys? Let's see, yes.
We're still on the non-crude oil to graph slide is what we're seeing at the moment.
Okay, let me just.
There we go.
Ah, perfect, thank you. It didn't look like it moved for me either, but I pressed all the buttons, so thank you. So this data reported here can be found in our fiscal year 21 performance metric report. So any of the slides you've seen or the type of data that we presented that you're interested in, you can find on our website in the form of an annual report or performance metric report, both of which is up there in perpetuity. If you're interested, that is. So this slide represents exercises and inspections. Those are combined for our reporting purposes. Complex plans or facilities with multiple components are inspected and exercised, but those only represent one data point on this chart here. So in fiscal year 21, we conducted 18 exercises and 19 inspections for a combined total of 37, which is lower than historic numbers, as you see here. We're attributing the majority of that to COVID-19 impacts and our ability to conduct both exercises and inspections for that entire fiscal year. There we go. Notable releases, responses, and impacts over the last year in the state. The first 3 releases we're going to talk about are in Savunga, Celiwick, and Wales, and they represent significant responses for each community from spills that could have been prevented. It's a common issue in rural Alaska loss of fuel, which is very expensive and have significant impacts on that community's budget and operations during winter months, in addition to the cost and impacts of the spill response itself. The Celiwick water treatment plant diesel overfill occurred on November 25th, 2020. An operator at the Celiwick water treatment plant discovered an overfill on a day tank during transfer from a larger tank that serves the community, and they lost an estimated 1,013 gallons of diesel. That day tank was left unattended during the transfer. Approximately 1,800 square feet was impacted by the release, including 300 square feet of contamination that was discovered later beneath a boardwalk adjacent to the spill site in December. The Celiwick response team recovered 750 gallons of diesel and moved all recovered contaminated snow and oil wastes to a property outside of town until it could be treated for disposal. Contamination remaining in the soil has been covered until it can be addressed for cleanup by the city. The spill location was approximately 610 feet from the Celiwick River, not far from the community drinking water intake. However, the intake submerged and no impacts to drinking water occurred. The release in Wales. On the evening of February 17th, 2021, a maintenance worker discovered a release of 1,862 gallons of number 2 diesel at the Kingston school in Wales. The cause of that spill was a valve left open during fuel transfer from a 10,000 gallon storage tank to a 550 gallon day tank that overflowed, releasing diesel to the ground. The Bering Strait School District, which is where Wales is situated, established a response team which delineated the site and collected contaminated snow into drums. The spill site is 150 yards from the Bering Strait and 15 yards from open tundra. No direct impacts to those resources have been identified. On the afternoon of February 27th, 2021, the Alaska Village Electric Co-op, or AVAC, discovered a spill at the Savunga power plant while taking inventory. The spill was reported to DEC and the NRC, the National Response Center, on March 1st. DEC and the US Coast Guard monitored the initial response offsite through phone conferences and email. An estimated 20,000 gallons of number 2 diesel was released from a bulk oil storage tank, primarily into secondary containment. Product was able to leave secondary containment in 3 locations, potentially caused by fuel wicking through snowdrifts, affecting an estimated 278 square feet outside of the line secondary containment area. That spill was because a valve was added to a header line on the bulk fuel tank as a temporary alleviate and airlock. The valve wasn't removed at the appropriate time and was left in an open position, allowing the diesel to spill. Cleanup included daily recovery, except during blizzard conditions, digging survey holes around the spill site, and soil sampling and removal. Snow from around the entire exterior perimeter of the tank farm was excavated to delineate the extent of the fuel that migrated outside of secondary containment. There's no indication that the contamination outside of secondary containment is a result of containment failure. And approximately 7,922 gallons of diesel pooled under the snow within the secondary containment was recovered into an empty on-site tank. A jackhammer was used to chip out impacted soil from around the outside of secondary containment. The soil was placed in fish totes and housed in an on-site connex. The site was closely monitored during spring breakup for indications of migration of contamination not recovered during winter response. In Utqiagvik, on June 22nd, 2021, a private citizen posted photos to Facebook of a buried tank leaking dark tar-like substances on the beach in Utqiagvik. ADEC was notified of the social media post that morning, and the North Slope Borough staff were able to confirm the location of the release. It was discovered that a row of 38 2,500 gallon tanks were cabled together and placed on the beach for erosion control in the late 1960s. Based on historical information, that leaking substance from those tanks was suspected to be asphalt or tar. North Slope Borough personnel initiated response actions on June 22nd and shoveled the tar-like substance into 55-gallon drums, placed sorbent boom around the tanks, barricades were placed around the site. That spill is located on a beach adjacent to the Beaufort Sea, which is subject to tidal fluctuations. No impacts to wildlife have been reported. Since the initial report, 3 tanks have been removed, including the one identified as the source of the initial spill report, and a phased plan to remove the remaining tanks and maintain erosion control is ongoing. On July 27th, Alaska State Troopers reported a rollover accident of a tanker truck carrying 12,500 gallons of crude oil in 2 trailers. One of those trailers was damaged, spilling an estimated 900 gallons of product, and the source of the leak was controlled at the scene, and remaining product was removed from the damaged tank before it was righted and taken in from the scene. The affected area was delineated and contaminated soils being removed and remediated. Potential resources at risk included wetlands and wildlife. This image, as cool as it is a 3-dimensional multi-beam sonar image taken in August. On August 3rd, 2021, and again on August 5th, members of the public notified the department of a sheen in Women's Bay in Kodiak, Alaska. An overflight confirmed that sheen later on in the day on August 5th. The cause of the sheen was a leaking sunken fishing vessel that had been moored in Women's Bay from 1981 to 1989, when it eventually sank on its mooring. On August 10th, 2021, a dive team discovered that the leak was coming from several pinholes in the vessel's hull, where the heads of the rivets had corroded away. Divers penetrated the hull and collected oil that had accumulated in internal spaces. Leaking oil observed during these operations was collected by suction, and double boom was placed at the surface. Booming was effective, but swell and strong currents had compromised the effectiveness at times. All accessible voids in the vessel were cleared of any remaining oil. Wildlife observers from the Kodiak National Wildlife Refuge were on site during the response. No oiled wildlife or impacts to shoreline were observed. At the time of demobilization on September 14th, 2021, a total of 11,955 gallons of oily water had been recovered, along with 606 bags of oiled sorbents. Responders confirmed source control was achieved on September 16th, 2021. With that, I'll open it up to questions.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Tiffany. Oops, get a little echo going. Do I echo now? Do I sound okay? Sound okay.
Sound fine to me.
Great. Thank you so much. Excellent presentation. I'm scanning the Q&A and I don't see any questions in there just yet. We'll give folks a moment to think up a question or two.
Sure.
And just so I remember, are you dialing in from Fairbanks or from Anchorage?
Yeah, no, I'm from Fairbanks, the interior of Alaska. I don't know, about 6 hours south of the Arctic Circle, if you'd like to know how northern we are.
Wow. Yeah. Holy smokes. You're way up there.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think we'll hit the end button there on the Alaska presentation. We've got no questions that have come in yet, but we'll keep scanning the Q&A throughout the day. If something trickles in, we'll draw it to your attention to respond. But with that, thank you so much for your presentation, and it was great to hear from you. And with that, we're going to jump from Fairbanks over to Oahu and Hawaii and hear from our colleagues there in the lovely tropical weather they're having, I'm sure, from Kathleen Ho, who's the Deputy Director of the Hawaii Department of Health, will be giving us an update from what's going on out there. Thank you, Kathy. Take it away.
Kathy, we do have, there you go.
Okay, hi everyone. My name is Kathy Ho. I am the Deputy Director of Environmental Health. I assumed this position in July of this year, and I replaced Keith Kawaoka, who has had 22 years of distinguished years of experience with the Department of Health. And this is my first annual meeting. So anyway, the Hawaiian Islands, next slide. The Hawaiian Islands extend some 1,500 miles from the southernmost island of Hawaii to the northernmost island of Kure Atoll. Midway Island is not included as a Hawaiian island. Hawaii is typically recognized by 8 main islands: Hawaii, Maui, Kaho'olawe, Lanai, Molokai, Oahu, Kauai, and Niihau. That's fine. For Hawaii, our oil spill response is appropriated from the environmental, all islands west of Niihau is unpopulated and unincorporated and incorporated into the Papa Auaumakua Marine National Monument established in 2006 and is listed as a U.S. national monument and is one of the largest fully protected marine conservation areas in the world. Hawaii gets its response appropriation and monies from the Environmental Response Revolving Fund. The source of the funding, it comes from a 5 cents per barrel tax on petroleum products and from civil penalties for environmental enforcement. In the last 5 years, we've received approximately $1.2 million appropriated for response actions. As COVID restrictions have been easing up, Hawaii has seen an increase in fuel consumption. For example, for aviation, we have a 402% increase in fuel consumption, gasoline 16%, and Hawaiian highway diesel is at 61%. There has been an increase in 2001 of release notifications. This slide depicts some of the more notable incidences and activities that we've participated in at the Department of Health, and I'll go through these slides individually. In March of 2021, approximately 30,000 gallons of jet fuel was spilt at Danuki'inoi Airport. In that incident, a subcontractor did a valve replacement, but the contractor did not check the valves prior to recharging the pipelines, and jet fuel A was released from the new valves. The spill was noticed by a employee of Southwest Baggage, a crew member, and notified the Department of Health. In this instance, there was no release of fuel to any navigable waters, but 30,000 gallons was spilled. Next slide. This is a picture of the release to the airport. Next slide. In July of 2021, a cargo plane took off from Honolulu at approximately 1:30 a.m. headed towards Kauai. Shortly after the takeoff, one engine failed and the pilot tried to return back to the airport, and the second engine failed, which resulted in an emergency water landing. Both crew members were rescued by the Coast Guard, but there was a very large sheen that was reported. And next slide. And this picture depicts the debris field was approximately 3/4 of a mile and in radius and at a depth of 300 to 400 feet. Next slide. We spent a lot of time at Red Hill Bulk Storage Facility this year. The Red Hill underground storage tank was built in the 1940s. It was strategically built to support the U.S. military operations in the Pacific Theater. There are approximately 20 large tanks built underground. Each tank holds approximately 12.5 million gallons of fuel. It also lies approximately a mile above Honolulu's main drinking water system, aquifer. At Red Hill this year, in March and June of 2020 at Hotel Pier, approximately 7,000 gallons of commingled fuel was recovered. Recovery is ongoing. And in May of 2021, a 16-inch pipeline inside Red Hill Bulk Storage Facility, we were notified that approximately 1,600 gallons of JP5 was spilled. And in July of 2021, at Kilo Pier, 150 gallons of F-76 fuel was reported. All of these resulted in approximately $2 million in cleanup costs, and remediation is ongoing. So this, the Navy Red Hill bulk storage tank is currently under an in contested case because the Department of Health, the Navy made an application to get a permit to operate the underground storage tanks, which in our state, you can ask for a contested case, and a full-blown hearing will be held on the application of the Navy's application. The Navy declared that the Red Hill bulk storage tank facility, including the pipelines heading towards the airport, was a critical infrastructure security, and therefore any records that we produce or that is requested of the Department of Health has to go through the Navy before we're able to release it. Sierra Club has sued the Department of Health to release some of the records that the Navy has produced to the Department of Health. In October last month, the Department of Health fined the Navy approximately $235,000 for safety violations at the facility. Next slide. In January of 2021, the Department of Health, along with its partners, did a disbursement exercise. OSRO has a DC-10 airplane stationed at Kailailoa Airport in Kapolei and maintains a crew 24/7. The DC-6 has a dedicated dispersant delivery system on board with fixed tanks, pumps, and spray arms. In August of 2021, DOH HERE office participated and deployed the flowometer on the OSRO oil spill response vessel. And this was observed by the Coast Guard to validate the dispersant application program. Next slide. The training site was 3 miles off. Next slide. The training site was 3 miles off of Ko'olina on the island of Oahu. Fluorescein dye was used to simulate the oil spill. The DC-6 flew multiple passes at an altitude of approximately 100 feet, spraying water to simulate the dispersants over the dye. And the DOH flowometer and associated equipment worked well. And we used the oil spill response vessel. As you can see, we conducted this in August of 2021, and we were fully masked. Next slide. In August of 2021, the DOH and its partners participated in an annual training for the U.S. Coast Guard. The pilots and loadmasters are required to be certified every year. Because the ADS was the first for the use of a new JPEG model, the Coast Guard had the ADS go through an entire operation while the C-130 ran at full throttle on the ground. The training involved loading the ADS into the C-130, securing and hardwiring the system to the C-130. The ADS operator then filled the tank with water, which simulates the disbursements, and ran the operations while grounded. The combined training and deployment exercise was coordinated by the Department of Health, along with its partners as listed on the slide. And next slide, please. Again, the training was done 3 miles off of Ko'olina, Hawaii, and the U.S. Coast Guard Pacific Strike Team participated and flew its helicopter 300 feet in altitude for the exercise. Next slide. After the Coast Guard made a low-level flyover applying the water, the Special Monitoring and Applied Response Technologies team, comprised of both industry, state, and our federal partners, drove into the dispersed plume and lowered the flowmeter and took readings at 1 and 3 meters, and happily it worked as it was supposed to. Next slide. The ADS team is, the ADS Dispersant Delivery System is a team of both federal, state, and industry partners, and we work together to apply the dispersants. This is a tool that Hawaii uses and has invested and should be needed should it be the need arise. Curtis Martin on the left, Kim Beasley, and Captain Gilbert Kanazawa was very instrumental in developing this agreement. Next slide. PAR is a refinery in Hawaii, and it imports 18 different types of crude oil. And Hawaii uses its disbursements and it tests. It's been tested, and we are ready and able to deploy if necessary. Next slide. Here is our information if anybody needs to like to get a hold of us, and we're happy to respond to any questions. And thank you very much. If anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you, Kathy. Great presentation. Always great to hear from our friends out in Hawaii. We do have one question that came in from Bill Marhofer. With the Hawaii state mandate for 100% renewable electrical production by 2045, how will HEER program be funded in anticipation of reduced oil imports?
That's a great question. We hope that our legislature will help fund us and appropriate more funds for us as we look to the future.
Awesome. We have no further questions at this point, so I think we'll wrap it up there. Thank you so much, Kathy, and we look forward to any additional questions that may trickle in throughout the day. Keep you posted on those. We have one more executive coordinator or executive member presentation today. It is from Carlos Clements. He is our newest member to the task force. He is the Spill Program Manager at Washington Department of Ecology, and we're excited to have Carlos on board. So with that, I'll hand it over to him to start the presentation.
Hello, thank you, Sarah. How are you? Can you see me? Oh, there you go. Hello, everyone. I'm Carlos Clements, and it is an incredible pleasure to be here with you. I will be having my slides up here in a second. I'm having a dear friend of mine, Miss Neer, when is going to be helping with the slides. I'm basically computer inept, and she's going to be kind enough to help me with that. As soon as we get that back up, and I can proceed.
Yeah, we weren't seeing the actual slides displaying. It was the editing screen. So Nee, let's try that again.
Not a problem.
Nee, we will need to start the slide deck again. I had to stop the screen share. And just in case, Carlos, I'll go ahead and get it pulled up as well.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Sorry about that, Caleb. Let's try one more time. Okay.
Let's try it again here real quick, just to make sure.
This is how it's all done, folks. We got it.
Yeah.
Okay, so you can see my presentation, and I just need to go into.
Let's try that. Last time it wasn't actually, when you clicked that, it clearly wasn't showing the actual slides. It stayed here on this screen. Let's try that again. Oh, okay, now just click the display settings at the top there and we'll swap which screen is displaying. There you go. Yep, now we're good.
All right.
Okay, thanks, Nee. Okay, here we go again. Hello, I'm Carlos Clemens, Program Manager for the Washington State Department of Ecology Spills Prevention, Preparedness, and Response Program. I'm happy to be here virtually with you all today. Next slide. Can we move to the next slide? Thank you. The Spills program is one of 10 environmental programs at the Department of Ecology. As an agency, these are our 5 strategic priorities, including the prevention and removal of toxic threats and pollution. Next slide. Since the last task force meeting, we continue our efforts to build back our capability along with you in our response community. It has been a year of recovery and resiliency for everyone. Here are some of the highlights from our work. Next slide. In response to field work restrictions and safety concerns related to the COVID-19 pandemic, our prevention section developed 2 new inspection techniques. Email screenings allow us to communicate with cargo and passenger vessels arriving in Washington waters. Over 3,000 of these ships transit through our waters each year, and the largest can carry up to 4.5 million gallons of fuel. Our email screening process creates a communications channel with vessels. We ask questions, receive documents, and review their procedures for compliance with Washington requirements, and make recommendations on areas to improve. We frequently receive letters from ship operating companies reporting on changes they've made for their entire fleet, which can include hundreds of ships calling on ports around the world. Since May of 2020, our inspections have completed 326 email screenings. So in effect, we're punching above our weight when we are actually implementing these procedures, and it actually has a global effect in a lot of cases. Very extremely proud of the work that's being done. We also began remote observations of oil transfers. Using key vantage points such as adjacent docks or locations along the shore, our inspectors can observe critical elements of oil transfers, such as compliance with Washington's pre-booming requirements and whether the receiving vessels have provided safe access between the ship and the barge. When our inspectors have questions, they can contact the company to resolve any issues. We have conducted over 1,000 remote observations so far. Our prevention team has also been busy with legislatively assigned risk assessment work. Over the summer, we published a report for the legislature describing vessel activity in the northern Puget Sound and Strait of Juan de Fuca. We have delivered a draft report to the Board of Pilotage Commissioners on vessel traffic trends following the implementation of a new tug escort requirement for certain tank vessels in Rosario Strait. And we developed the scopes of work that will guide 2 analysis projects using our new oil spill risk model that the program is developing. Next slide. Area planning work. We are on a year 4 to realign and reconfigure our regional and area plans. This has been a year of good progress. We continue to use virtual platforms for all drills, attended and evaluated nearly 100 drills, all done virtually. And lastly, our community is undertaking a full-scale format update to geographic response plans from the original single document PDF to a modern web-based format. Over 2/3 of the state's GRPs have been converted to this new format, which significantly increases the accessibility and usability of the plans. We have a standing work group for Oregon, Idaho, Washington to work on GRP improvements. Next slide. Our response to indicates continues to be a steady rate, averaging roughly 4,300 yearly statewide. Spill notification data from the past 12 months shows the breakdown of the types of calls we receive. Our program sees predominantly oil-related calls. All reported spills are investigated, and ecology responders do a field response to about 20% of the reported spills. Next slide. Other responses include our equipment, cash grants, and restoration project. This year, we had a total of 59 applications, totally 6.2 million. Unfortunately, we only have 3.1 million in awards, so some hard decisions will need to be made. Also, this last year, we were able to find 10 restoration projects. These are funds from the Natural Resource Damages Assessment Penalties. A notable response from this year was the response to the fishing vessel Aleutian Falcon. We responded with the United States Coast Guard, Trident, Tacoma Fire, MSRC, and Resolve Marine. There was no diesel spilled, small amount of the hydraulic oil spilled from equipment on deck. Given the nature of the incident and the location in an urban dense community, community air monitoring was performed by Ecology and with the support from the EPA. No release of chlorine or anhydrous ammonia burned up in the fire with no impact to the surrounding community. The lessons learned. IR drones were effective at spotting very thin hydraulic oil at night. The community air monitoring was focused on environmental justice areas based on online and at-risk community mapping. The EPA has an excellent data visualization system for air monitoring, and Ecology is building on a compatible system. Also, lessons learned about differing safety cultures in different industries. Fishing industry has a higher risk tolerance than we are used to and needs additional safety monitoring. The smaller images from a tweet with the community air monitoring results. The image was live data in EPA's data visualization system. If anyone asks, air monitoring was for fractional, basically, air monitoring was for a fractional particulate, total particles plus 10, 2.5, and basically it's a lot of data. And if you'd like, we can send that to you. I don't want to bore everyone with it. Next slide. In looking forward into 2022, our program is tackling some policy changes in the legislator and updating our regulation through rulemaking. For rulemaking, in August of this year, Ecology announced that we are beginning our rulemaking to update 2 chapters of our Washington Administrative Code, Chapter 173-180 WAC, Facility Oil Handling Standards, and Chapter 173-184 WAC, Vessels Oil Transfer Advance Notice and Containment Requirements. Chapter 173-180 WAC establishes our oil spill prevention and oil transfer requirements for regulated oil handling facilities. And the other establishes oil transfer requirements for vessels delivering oil in bulk on or over waters of the state. Amendments are needed to both of these chapters to incorporate statutory changes made in the 2019 legislative session that expanded advance notice of oil transfer reporting requirements for class 1 and 2 and 3 facilities, and for vessels delivering oil in bulk on or over waters of the state. Additionally, these rules have not been updated since 2007, and we are utilizing the opportunity to update both rules. We are making administrative updates and broader policy changes that are needed to provide clear direction to our regulated community, address gaps identified, and incorporate lessons learned through years of implementing these rules. The full proposal rulemaking scope can be found at our website, and you can see this link is set up in the slide. We'll make sure we get it out to everyone who would like to see it. Ecology is currently in the rule language development phase, and we plan to host multiple workshops with interested tribes, regulated companies, and stakeholders through August of 2022. We plan to issue the formal rule proposal in December 2022 and adopt the amendments in June 2023. Next slide. For our legislative session, we are working on 2 requests. First, Washington uses the Northwest Area Contingency Plan to meet requirements in state statute to have a statewide master oil and hazardous substance spill prevention and contingency plan. It's RSCW 90.56. In practice, we have an inclusive process, but our statutes do not currently reflect this. We are proposing to update them to acknowledge the critically important role that tribes have in the planning for oil and hazardous substance spills. Secondly, there are a few other amendments we're proposing related to the update process, including changing some language referring to contactors, spill management teams, and wildlife response contractors to be consistent with other sections of the chapter of the section, and to include a requirement for Ecology to perform unannounced drills for vessels as part of the statewide master plan updates. We already do this in practice, but it was not included in the requirements along with the existing requirement to hold unannounced drills for facilities. We submitted our proposal for final approval, and we're waiting to hear back on whether we can proceed with introducing it as a bill for the 2022 legislative session in Washington. Slide. I want to thank you all for your patience, and that is my presentation. Back to you, Sarah.
Okay, thank you, Carlos. Excellent presentation, and thanks, Nee, for troubleshooting the technical behind the scenes little issues there. Nice work getting it all together.
Thanks, Nee.
Hey, you can't have a really successful Zoom meeting without at least a couple roadblocks. So we've had a couple hiccups and all par for the course. Thanks everyone for being patient. And we do have a question for Carlos. Was there any community air monitoring in Washington State during the Zim Kingston fire?
Okay, we did, Nee, you might have to back me up on this because I'm still getting a lot of the jargon down on this, Sarah. I don't believe there was because of the location. And let me see if it's, yeah. Well, I don't believe we didn't put anything out. We were just in standby mode.
Sure.
There was, I believe Canada had it on and it was being monitored and all concerns are being taken care of. But on our side, due to the weather and everything else, it didn't make it down this way, but we were on alert for it.
Excellent. Awesome. Let's see. There's just another comment about the fire, but no other further questions at this point. So thank you, Carlos. And a big virtual round of applause for all of our task force executive members for stepping up and giving us wonderful presentations today. Each of those had a lot of really rich, different information about incidents and spills and programs. And it was great to get a snapshot of what's going on across our Western states and BC. I'm going to give you guys a 1-minute stretch break again as Hillary and I pivot to get ready to give you an update on the task force work. So take a minute, stretch, don't go far, and we'll start up again in one minute. Thank you.